And so, can you sort of play that forward? Like, what does that mean for how community aggregation happens online? Does this have implications kind of in the offline world? So,
Yeah.
kind of, I know you've talked a lot about or thought a lot about things like what happens. You kind of alluded to this, like what happens to the average person in like India or Nigeria, where like the world that they're entering is not a transition world. It's like sort of if you're 18 today in India, you have a phone and you're going to have all this content you place forward 10 years. Like you didn't go from Silicon Valley into a transition world. Like
right,
you like leapfrogged and entered this new world. And so what are the implications kind of in the real world for people in, I guess, two parts of society? One is people who are like in India or Nigeria who are sort of entering this world. And then there might be very different implications for people in, let's say, Beijing or San Francisco who sort of have an existing world order that will need to transition into this new world.
Right. So lots of things to shoot out there. So basically, one thing that's happening in India now, I'm not sure if everybody's aware of this, but Reliance Jio is like a new provider that's come online in India, and it's added hundreds of millions of people to like 4G LTE just over the last few years. So India has really hit like the J part of the curve in terms of like internet growth. And it's now, like at least like the latest metrics I've seen, it's now like #3 worldwide for unicorns, right? So it's like the US, China, India. It's actually now #3, right? And starting to really grow. So that's a really interesting market because in some ways it's like, 10 years behind China, maybe always will be, but it's definitely kind of accelerating. And those folks, when they come online, they're actually like a totally new demographic and threat. Like people have talked about, should I say threat? Not really threat, but let's say force, worldwide. For one thing, if something like Earn or whatever works, you have a bunch of folks who you can bring in for lots and lots of different kinds of tasks, right? So people have been talking about automation, but I think you're going to see scaled outsourcing on a level that you haven't seen, right? And one way of thinking about this is, if you're like an American middle class kind of person, well, if you're an employer, it's actually kind of hard to employ somebody else on a middle class salary, right? If you're making $70,000 and after taxes, you've got like, 40,000 or whatever, and like to pay somebody else after paying your room and board, it's like really hard to do, where you're paying them $20,000, you're really scrimping and saving. So the workaround for that until recently has been to employ a machine. Right? Use Amazon Web Services, right? You basically, that's a new thing, by the way. Like the last 10 or 15 years have allowed that middle class person to gain leverage by employing computers to do tasks and thereby like becoming more and more productive. What I think crypto does, plus the rise of the internet in all of these developing world countries, it does allow you to employ humans, but not a $20,000 a year American, but $1,000 a year, Nigerian or Indian or South American or whatever, right? And crypto makes that easy, right? I think that's a big story of the next 10 years that folks haven't really thought as much about. Remote work is like V1 of that, but I think you're going to see like more of that. And that becomes more feasible as more tasks become possible to do over a computer. You can do transcription and you can do, like labeling of videos, and more work becomes fundamentally digital, right? So anyway, I think that's a big part.